Hey guys, welcome to Band Together, a podcast by the family Crest.
That's us.
That's
Here
us.
we are.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
it's me.
Nothing's changed. We're still in quarantine.
Well, some stuff has changed. Our state is on fire.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
Was it not on fire when we did the last one?
It was, but it wasn't as on fire. Laura and I went to visit my parents. We got all COVID tested and stuff. And we're like, yeah, we'll get away from the city for a bit, get away from the smoke. But they live in wildfire country. And so it was really smoky and really hot. So that was rough on our lungs. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the show tomorrow, because I've been going a lot like this lately.
It gives you a charm. As long as you stay soft with it, you got a little charm when you have that.
I mean, if I just smoked, if I just smoked all the time, I could sound like John Mayer.
I want to run through the woods of high school. That's all I'm going to sing so we don't get copyright claimed.
Yeah. Honestly, I got to say for that dude, like there's a lot of smoking. I mean, Sinatra smoked. And if you listen to Sinatra's voice, I mean, fuck Sinatra. He's too good. He's just, everything he sings is perfect. But Mayer does this weird R&B kind of thing, and you hear the smoke and it works.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird. Yeah. Anyway, well, before we get into this podcast theme this week, you guys want to do music picks?
Yeah.
Sure.
Of course.
All right, who's opening?
I'll start. So I recently watched, for all you youngins, you won't know what I'm talking about, but I just watched a couple days ago the new Bill and Ted movie. Bill and Ted Face the Music.
Thoughts?
How was it?
Wait.
Thoughts? Very good for a 30-year later nostalgic movie.
Really?
Yeah, because like most times they suck. Like Blues Brothers 2000, horrible. Like all those movies are like 20 years later, and we do a sequel. It's usually like and it's bloated and it sucks. Bill and Ted Face the Music was very tight. I mean, you'll have problems with it, but like,
can you watch it on like? Can you like get it on? Apple
you have to rent it on like Amazon Prime and stuff.
Oh my God, babe!
But yeah, it came out last week. If you're not gonna
watch it with me, I'm renting it. Did you and I had fears that Keanu Reeves
it was
in
okay.
The trailer seemed like he was kind of like phoning it in, but
here's the thing: Alex Winter like nailed it. Like he was like exactly the same. Keanu Reeves kind of seemed like a little bit of a parody of himself, but the movie was good enough. You weren't annoyed by it, and you kept living your life, and it was fine.
Okay, and don't spoil it. But how many cameos can I expect?
A couple.
Okay.
There's the beginning of the movie. There's a couple funny jokes that are like hilarious.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna probably watch this tonight.
Yeah, I won't. I won't spoil
that's one of my,
it. But it's
original
to me,
Bill and Ted's like my childhood.
Yeah, to me it starts off really strong, then maybe lags for like 10 minutes. You're like, oh no, it's gonna get bloated and crappy. And then when they start traveling through time again, then it suddenly just like moves, and you have questions, and some things maybe don't make sense. You're like, why did they have this or whatever? And it ends abruptly, oddly enough. But it was still just like that was enjoyable. Like
okay,
because I expected way less. But anyway, so my music picks are going to be from the soundtrack. Because
new soundtrack or old soundtrack?
The new soundtrack. There's a soundtrack for this, and so I discovered this artist because he's on the soundtrack, and he does it's called they're called Big Black Delta, and it's the solo project of Jonathan Bates. Is that his name? He's the lead singer of Melodrone, but he has this solo project called Big Black Delta, which is kind of like electronica / 80s kind of thing. Like, so that kind of works perfectly for this, for this like new Bill and Ted movie. So this was like the opening track to the movie. It was called Lost in Time. I think it's written for the movie, and it has it like kind of like reminds you of Dancing with the Gypsy. That was like the intro track to Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, but being something new and stuff like that. So that's the first one. And the second one is Weezer also wrote an original song for the movie called Beginning of the End, Wild Stallions mix.
Stallions.
Yeah, they call it Wild Stallions. I think it's the only mix of the song. I don't know. But the song is very generic Weezer, but it does have like an awesome like 80s type solo that kind of just fits right in with Bill and Ted and stuff. So So it was
Awesome.
awesome. So yeah, so those are my picks for this week.
Okay, well,
I'm
gonna jump in just because since you said that I have to choose one of the songs from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure,
That's what he said.
which I didn't plan on, but I'm gonna throw out there because I think it's a dope song because it's a dope song. It's called "I Can't Break Away."
Yeah.
By Mitch Bottler and Gary Zelke.
That's the song I was referencing. I said Dancing with the Gypsy. That's a song also in the Bill and Ted soundtrack, but the song Lost in Time at Big Black Delta, it opens kind of like I Can't Break Away.
Yes.
That's what I was trying to say.
Beautiful.
I don't know why I said Dancing with the
Well,
Gypsy.
then that works perfect.
Yeah.
So that'll be pick one. Pick two is another movie theme. I'm on a movie theme kick because the next few weeks I'm doing the at these Thursday cover streams, music through the eras through movies. Last week was the 60s. This week is going to be the 70s. And I hadn't really delved into Live and Let Die too much. I'd heard it. I saw Paul once live and he played it. Great song. But I never actually really like sat down and listened to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the weird, as I was listening to it, it's like, it's Paul McCartney, so it's going to be good. But it's the weirdest song ever. I mean, the way that it moves and it's like so jarring. It's almost like listening to a short version of the White Album, how they go through these things and it's not, you listen to Sgt. Pepper's and they go from Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band into A Little Help from My Friends. And it kind of is a seamless flow. Yeah. Whereas on the White Album, they'll go through these songs where it's like, click, click, there's these weird, and it's like that in song form. So he has the opening, which is a totally different song than the weird that's very orchestral. And then he has this kind of like reggae.
Yeah, the woman
bridge.
Didn't matter to you. If you gotta do a job, you gotta do it well. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's weird because there's not really the verses, because they repeat, are almost like pre-choruses, and then there's almost only one verse, which is that weird thing, but I guess it could be a bridge. I don't know. Anyway, that's my music pick. It's awesome. If you've never really sat down and listened to it, it is a treat for your ears and weird. And my last pick, just because today's podcast is all about music and politics and stuff like that, is going to be a fantastic song a fantastic piece, I should say, written by a one Mike Post, because we're going to be talking about Law and Order. I thought I'd throw in the theme song to Law and Order SVU, which has the dope guitar, it's bright.
There's some dope slap bass in there, I think, too.
It's what dreams were made of. So I'm putting in the theme song to Law and Order SVU. And also, secondary fun fact, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but our shower door, when you open it, has a weird ka-chunk sound. Mm-hmm. And I realized about 2 years ago, and I recorded it, it sounds like the kunk-kunk thing that they do in Law and Order whenever they switch scenes.
Well, now I'll never be able to relax in the shower again.
Every time you open it, you're going to hear that.
That's the sound you want to hear right when you're about to be naked in the shower.
Dun, dun. Order.
All right, you want to go, babe?
Sure, I'll go. Okay, so my first pick is The Boy Is Mine, Brandy and Monica, because have you guys heard about this series Versus? That's been happening on Instagram Live.
Yeah.
Essentially, two artists perform, and it's sort of a battle. It's presented as a battle, but it's all, it's very much based in camaraderie. But
of course.
Anyway, Brandy and Monica did one this week. So have to do The Boy Is Mine. One of the greatest girl duets / songs.
Top 5 for sure.
Yeah. My second pick is Nabaya Garcia, who's a jazz musician. Mm-hmm. She just released a record called Source, and the song I picked is called The Message Continues. But she's incredibly talented, very vibey, very interesting.
Yeah, she has kind of a mellow Kamasi feel, not with the orchestration and stuff, but just based kind of similar in terms of his rhythm. Actually, we were in the car.
She's a saxophone player.
Yeah, she's dope. We were in the car and Laura typical awesome Laura fashion, we're playing like, radio roulette, and this song comes on. I'm like, no, don't turn it, because it had this dope jazz like beat. I don't know, like everything was high end and tony, and it was awesome, and the snare was amazing, and the drums were amazing. And she looks it up, because I was like, please Shazam this, and it turns out it was this woman, and she was like, I told you. And I was like, I know, I said you were right. And she's like, no, but I just wanted to say I told you.
On that note, my final pick is the most exciting. So evidently, an entire show recording of Ella Fitzgerald was discovered in the home of the founder of Verve, and so they're releasing these tapes and on a record called the Lost Berlin Tapes. So I'm picking Mac the Knife from that recording, this recording was done 2 years after her iconic Mac the Knife Berlin show that is the really famous one that's been released.
How do you sit on an Ella Fitzgerald? How do you not know you have a live Ella Fitzgerald record?
Honestly, I feel like when you die, I'm gonna find in your voice memos like 100 records.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
This
you
is
won't find like a
stuff,
recording
though,
of like you won't find like a recording of the Strokes in their basement or something. You know what I mean?
They lost Coltrane records and Miles Davis records too. I'm like, how? What?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we're lucky. We're being blessed with some Ella. We thought that 2020 was the
good
worst.
thing happened.
This is making it a little sweeter.
One thing happened.
And yeah, the only song that's been released off of that record thus far is Mac the Knife. So that's what I chose.
Bravo. Owen?
I'll check that up. I was just going to do a quick shout out real quick. I was just thinking about, John, you were saying the Bill and Ted thing held up pretty well for like a way later. So do you guys remember the video in 2005, Shoes by Kelly?
I know where you're going.
Shoes.
Yes.
Wait,
shows.
Shoes?
Shows. She also did muffins too, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember
Like
this at all.
Star Wars muffins, Israeli-Palestinian conflict
Shoes.
muffins. Like,
Wasn't that the first viral YouTube video?
That was like one of the first viral YouTube videos of all time.
but yeah,
Anyway.
that character's back.
Yeah. As of yesterday, Kelly has released a song called Masks. And it's kind of a remake of Shoes, but about masks. But holds up pretty well. It's also all made distanced. So all of the original characters are on there, but like on a Zoom.
Nice.
Wow. Bravo.
So my
Bravo.
actual picks, I'm doing kind of two like electrofunk things. I don't know why.
Oh.
Maybe that's my mood this week.
That's the
My first is Tame Impala, Lost in Yesterday.
Solid.
Which is off the record they released. I think it was in 2020. I think it was early 2020, so approximately 10 and a half years ago. It's a joke about the length of 2020.
Jokes don't even land
I got
on me
it.
anymore.
I got it.
Wait. Got it.
The other one's older. It's Tuxedo, Do It. Tuxedo was Mayor Hawthorne's side project with Jake One, the rapper. It's more like
yes.
It's a little more like intense funk, a little less like smooth Mayor Hawthorne stuff, but it's a good song.
Dope. I'll
So
listen
those are
to
my
it.
picks.
I'm just going to throw this out. I know we put it on last week's pick, but I'm doing it again just because I want people to hear it. Miley Cyrus's new song is so goddamn good. Have you guys heard it yet?
Yeah. I saw the video and everything.
It is a jam. It is so good. All right. Well, I'm going to segue into what we're talking about and why we're talking about it, because even John doesn't know why we're talking about this. He thought it was because of Jim Gaffigan. But as the quarantine has gone on, a lot of bands are doing live shows, interacting with their audiences. Myself, I'm doing it at least once a week, sometimes twice a week. And we get we're lucky on our end because our fans, I think, generally understand who we are. I think it's pretty apparent, even if you remove any context of who we are as people listening to our music. I think it's pretty apparent what we probably stand for. Not a lot of bands are writing love anthems and get along anthems. And I've noticed in our thing and in a few others, every once in a while you'll post something or you'll say something that is political or humanitarian, and or people take it as something that's political, and they'll make a suggestion in a kind of rude way that like, oh, I come here for an escape. And by the time this airs, I'm going to address this in the live stream tomorrow. But there was somebody that posted last week. I addressed Black Lives Matter. I addressed the recent shootings, which this week there's been another one, probably more that I'm just unaware of. And, you know, I didn't really see that as being a political issue. I saw, or a statement. I saw it more as a humanitarian statement. I didn't want to talk about Black Lives Matter in a controversial way. I wanted to explain to anyone that didn't understand what the phrase means, because a lot of people take it the wrong way. They generally, I see a lot of people saying, well, you know, when they'll throw the All Lives Matter thing out, and it's interesting because to people that are saying Black Lives Matter, they're not saying that Black lives matter more than all lives, period. They're saying at this point in our history, Black lives, generally speaking, are put through the ringer in comparison to other people's lives. And we need to help the people that are struggling at this point. If a house is on fire and a house is not on fire, you're going to save the people in the house on fire. It doesn't mean the other people don't matter. It just means that the people's house is on fire. And I said it in a pretty uncontroversial way, and I got a comment back that was not cool to talk about politics this week. Music is meant for escape. And I was sitting on that and thinking about it, and what I found interesting is that, first of all, music, in my opinion, is about a lot of different things. As an artist, the concept of music, what we're trying to do is give you our emotional output, give you our thoughts. We're literally, you know, speaking to you. And sure, there are certain bands that I listen to that are an escape, but that's my use of that band. You know, like other people might, like I don't listen to a lot of Simon and Garfunkel songs from the 60s that were clearly about protest and think, oh, I'm listening to a protest song. Sometimes I listen to it because it's mellow and it's an escape. And I think it's a really interestingly self-involved approach to tell an artist when they're playing a show that what you perceive music as is what it should be, and they, on their own soapbox, shouldn't be allowed to say anything. In our band, you know, if you're working with a brand, it changes. You have to be more careful about what you're saying and how you're saying it because you are working with a brand. But in our band, even with us, we all don't post, or at least I don't post a lot of things politically because I don't want the scrutiny. I have to think about how many people are listening to my songs and how many people, you know, do look towards the music as an escape. But on my own show that you're not paying money for, that you're watching, that you're tuning into, that you can leave at any time, I just don't think it's really appropriate to like put what you think something should be about when other people are enjoying it, and tell someone what to say. I just don't think that that's appropriate. And so it got me thinking about, you know, music and politics and how, well, there's a lot of bands that literally their entire career was based on politics. The reason that they got popular was based on being political. And where do we draw those lines? And the plight of the artists nowadays that can't really say what they want to say all the time, and what our responsibility actually is to our fans. But anyway, so that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. I've given you a lot of my perspective as I usually do. So I'll let you guys kind of.
Well, before we dive in, I will just say quickly to anyone who thinks that music is not and has not been lined and intertwined with politics and protest, sorry for this pod, because basically everything you know is a lie, because most music has some sort of message in it. And, you know, you may or may not agree with that message, but the beauty of music is that you can often take the words of a song and project what you want onto that and get something out of it. whether it's the intent of the writer or not.
Well, and also, you know, one thing that I learned through you and Owen, because when you listen to classical music, if you don't have context, you're just listening to pretty music. But artists like Shostakovich that were operating in a really unique situation where they were being asked to write music, and I'm going to let you guys talk about it because you both, from a historical perspective, know way more than me. But from what I understand, he's being paid to write music by the government to some degree, but he's throwing lines and phrases and things in to state what he's actually feeling and essentially contextualizing it later.
Often he didn't even contextualize it.
It didn't need to be contextualized, yeah.
Well, no, it's because he couldn't risk his life.
But so you're right. It's existed. And to this person's credit, I've thought about this as well. They may have been saying, you know, I come here to watch a show and not hear political soapboxing.
I'm sorry. I have to just say this. It really bothers me. Black Lives Matter is not a political issue.
Right.
It's a human issue. It's very frustrating for me.
Well, I think when it comes to Black Lives Matter, the thing that always is hard for me to see people reacting to is either they understand what we're trying to say and they just don't care, or they don't understand. And when you explain it, people aren't willing to hear what you're saying because they're so wrapped up in their pride. And I fully understand that politics and pride are intertwined. You know, when you're raised in any family in any way, you're going to take on certain views as you grow up. Even myself, like there are political things that are wrapped up in pride. But I keep seeing people saying, well, I'm not allowed to be proud of my heritage. And I'm always like, what does Black Lives Matter have to do with being proud of your heritage? Like, nothing. I'm Chinese, Irish, British. I just found out I'm like 15% Vietnamese this weekend. Like, yeah, I know. Pho. Anyway, but pho, right? Yeah. But I'm proud of where I like my ancestry. I dive into those things. I like learning about where I come from. But when I hear Black Lives Matter, that doesn't make me feel like I can't be proud of where I come from or who I am. It makes me, it's a totally different context. And I think that that's just a straw man argument to just throw, it's not a, anyway.
Well, to go back a little bit, I mean, it's possible that person making the comment doesn't even disagree with anything that you were saying.
Right. Exactly.
They're just overwhelmed because, I mean, we're all a little overwhelmed. 2020's been a really shitty ride.
And you want to, and you're going somewhere.
The problem is, it's still, I mean, how do you, especially in a free stream, how do you dictate to an artist like what they're allowed to express to the world? I mean,
and you know what's funny? I was thinking about that statement as well, and the fact that it's free. And I still don't believe that your views, if you like my music, that's great. And if you want to listen to my albums, that's great. Most people right now, we're not making a whole lot of money off of the majority of the people that listen to our music, So if you want to listen to my albums and if you want to and get the escape, that's great. But when you come to a show where it's a live performance where it is my music, but it's also, I have to talk to you. Banter is the hardest thing about being on stage for anybody. What right do you have to tell me what I can and cannot say? Period.
Well, none.
Right. None. It's just odd. Like I've gone to shows and been upset by something that's happened or something that someone said or a way that someone's performed, but I would never feel that I could message them and tell them that they'd done something wrong because that's their show. That's what they do. I paid to see it, but they get to do what they do. That's a part of it.
Well, I think there's also just a constant undercurrent of anxiety for artists, particularly related to speaking out about quote unquote controversial issues, because in the past we've seen over and over again artists be
canceled,
punished, and basically run out of the business for expressing their beliefs. A perfect example is the Dixie Chicks.
The Chicks, yeah.
Now known as the Chicks. And
kind of blacklisted.
I don't know.
I think it's
They
worse
were.
too now that like recorded music makes so little money, because now you have to be, if you want to make money, I mean, you can tour, but you kind of have to be brand friendly too. And it's like a whole nother added layer that people hadn't had to deal with really as much in, say, like the 90s and before.
You know, actually on that subject, because I didn't know about Jim Gaffigan until John wrote this thing like, oh, are we going to talk about this because of Jim Gaffigan? So John, why don't you explain what happened recently with Gaffigan?
So Jim Gaffigan is a comedian. He's kind of I think he prided himself on being like a clean comedian. Never in his acts would never have any political issues. You'd have no idea, how.
He didn't really curse at all, right?
No, he didn't curse either. He wanted to be clean. He wanted to appeal to everyone. So he's been doing that for years, and he's had success with that, I believe. But
he had a bunch of commercials.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I know you did like a minivan commercial stuff.
Yeah, those minivan. I can't remember what brand, but I remember.
Yeah, it was like,
a while.
I remember the van was called the Pacifica, because that's my hometown, Pacifica, California.
Oh, then it's Chrysler.
Chrysler, there you go. It was like Chrysler
Suburban
Pacifica,
luxury.
I think.
Suburban luxury, dog.
Suburban luxury.
But anyway, he finally kind of just had it and went on a whole Twitter rant, basically, after I think probably triggered by watching the Republican National Convention or something, or just something of Trump,
or anything,
and just went off.
I could be wrong, but I think it was triggered because this happened on Sunday, and I'm pretty sure what I read was that it was triggered by Trump claiming that the recent guy.
We won't say his
name. His
on
name
this podcast.
doesn't.
Bleep his name when I say it. That he was shooting in self-defense, and that he was essentially a freedom fighter. I mean, I think that he just had it.
Yeah.
But even what he said, I don't think was terribly. He dropped an F-bomb.
Yeah.
But
he hadn't been doing either.
That brings up an interesting point too. That like I think artists are held to such an extreme level of what we are allowed to express. Like we expect artists to express all that they are in their music, but we don't allow them to express any of what they are in their personality. Take Gaffigan, for example, like he has to like box himself in. And as soon as he says something that, by the way, is far less controversial than what I see most people post on Facebook on a daily basis, he is now being talked about like, oh, he went off, he went crazy. It's like, I see people post worse stuff on my Facebook feed from both sides of the ticket every day. Yeah. Like really, really controversial things that don't do any service to what we're going through in our country in terms of how partisan we are. Like I see people posting stuff every day that just is basically to throw a dagger at the other side, and he says something that is, it's heated, but it's not nearly as controversial as the average day-to-day person, and he gets shit canned for it.
I mean, I don't even know if he's getting shit canned for it. I'm sure. I mean, there's people on the other side that obviously went after him, which I think a lot of the response, he just said, fuck you. He didn't even try. Or maybe he did argue. I didn't read all of it, to be honest. I'm looking at some of it right now, but it's basically specifically about Trump and stuff, and just,
I was just reading it too.
Yeah.
It's nothing that he says is particularly crazy either. I mean, he just let his frustrations boil over, which I think, especially now that everyone's just sitting at home, it's like, how can you not? Yeah. It's not healthy to not let your stuff boil over sometimes.
Right. But he was a particular person. Honestly, there was another artist who's the same, who kind of had the same views as was Dolly Parton. Dolly Parton actually is spoken out before, saying that artists should keep their mouths shut. And recently she's, been talking in favor of Black Lives Matter and stuff like that. So it's like,
and she's really forthright about it, which is hilarious.
She was another one.
She was pro gay rights a long time ago in country music, where it's like, you better keep your mouth shut.
Right.
Even someone of her stature could have faced massive blacklisting and something like that.
She survived.
Oh,
and I mean, and the Chicks survived too. I mean, it might have been an uphill battle, because
Yeah.
I think what's interesting too is like, I think that, some of us in the band post more political things than others.
He's talking about me.
which I look, at the end of the day, like Laura has more courage than I do.
I'll retweet you sometimes, Laura.
Yeah. Laura posts, and I'm going to make this perfectly clear, like every belief that Laura posts on Instagram and Facebook is the belief that I share, except for about certain musical things. But
except the stuff that doesn't matter.
I guess, yeah. Politics we share. But the thing on my end, what I found kind of personally insulting is the wrong word, just like it left a bad taste in my mouth, is when I do post and when I do talk about anything political. You know, I grew up in a really rural area. I grew up with a lot of conservatives. I still have a lot of friends from high school, from my younger days, that are extremely conservative. Sometimes super conservative to the point that I'm like, come on. And I will. This is my point as well. And I'll say I have friends that are on
they
the
say the same thing
liberal
about you,
side.
baby.
Yeah. But, well, I don't post enough for them to, but I have friends on the liberal side that also do the same thing. They post things that I'm like, you're going too far. You're being too insulting. You know, I've talked a lot about not getting into altercations through comment boards because you can't see the person you're talking to. I even go as far as saying things like, you know, don't get into these altercations because at the end of the day, there's so much pride wrapped up in it and you're just trying to prove someone wrong. You know, I try to be in somewhat, even though people know I'm liberal, of a center position of try to create some kind of bipartisan communication. You know, when Trump was elected, I was the only person at our election get together that said, like, this guy has a real shot. I was really upset when he was elected. But the next day, I didn't post that I was upset. The next day, I posted to my friends on both sides, you know, to try to at least talk to one another, to try to understand perspective. And I said, I hope this guy actually does a good job because I don't want anybody that's running our country to fail. You know,
Yeah, well, they're failing you. So.
Yeah, exactly. And what's interesting is having done all these things, having tried to be very thoughtful about the way I post so that I'm not attacking anyone, trying to post things in a way that's saying, you know, I understand even why you believe what you believe, but just think about what I'm saying. You don't need to actually take it on. Just think about it, right? Which is, I honestly could probably count the amount of times I've posted about politics in the last 4 years on two hands. The fact that I've even gone that far and somebody does that, it just rubbed me the wrong way because, again, agreeing with Laura, Black Lives Matter isn't even a political issue. It's not like I got on our live stream and said down with Trump.
Well,
you know,
people have tried very hard to make it a specifically binary political issue. Like, if you support it, you're on the left, and if you or hate it, you're on the right, and that's just how it works. And it's just, which is insane.
Yeah.
And it works both ways because, you know, a lot of people on the left, you know, are going super, super, super hard against the police. And I don't think, like, from my perspective, you know, I read what a lot of the right says about the police and they feel, at least some of them feel, that the police force is being attacked wholeheartedly. They misinterpret, which I believe is our fault, the, you know, what is the term, defund the police, which is, in my opinion, just the worst way to say it, because no one's saying take money away necessarily. In fact, a lot of people believe give more money to the police, just give them a better structure and actually look into the culture behind the police. I have friends that are in the police force. I have a lot of friends that are really good cops, but at the end of the day, there are also really bad cops. And right now in our country, we're seeing a lot of violence coming from the people that are supposed to protect us. You know, and I see a lot of communication about it being, you know, well, there's riots, and there's a lot of information out there on both sides that we can be taking in, that we can understand why things are happening. It's not black and white. And I see a lot of people making comments on the day-to-day that are so blatantly unresearched and just talk points that they've heard from their friends. And again, that's not something that we as a band, as artists, have ever done. We literally very rarely make political statements. If you look to artists of the 60s, you know, a lot of the music was surrounded by and cultivated around the Vietnam War and around politics or civil rights.
Well, and I think we'll get there because we can kind of do a century by century
Yeah.
overview, I think, would be the best structure for this. But I did want to just quickly recommend an article, which we'll post on our website, that was in the Post a couple years ago, called, it's by Eugene Scott, and it's called "Musicians Discuss Politics Because They Have Identities Beyond Being Entertainers." And I think that headline just perfectly encapsulates this issue, because we present ourselves as being these kind of uniform people that like play together, work together, but in doing that, we're kind of doing ourselves a disservice, because all of us have different views on many different things, and we have many facets of our lives that we don't share publicly. And when you are only sharing one side of yourself publicly for a really long time, then there's a sense of comfort in that, and it's not very authentic. And so I think that we're just, I don't know, I feel like we all have been very wary of saying or doing anything political. Even something like asking people to register to vote was something we would never have done even 5 years ago.
Right.
Well,
I think we did do
start
that,
leading
but we were
up to the
very
election.
neutral about it.
But we were very concerned about it. And now I think we just all acknowledge that staying silent, particularly about the Black Lives Matter movement and the issues and conversations surrounding Black Lives Matter, I just think it's just not enough for us to be silent anymore.
Well, things have changed.
Like, we're trying to be anti-racists here. Like, we are an anti-racist band, and like,
well, and we're
if being anti-racist is active versus non-racist, which is passive, and we want to use our platform, however large or small people think it is, to like at least try to support things that we believe in.
Well, and I also think that, a lot of times, because again, I see these arguments going back and forth, and there's this weird line where it's like, because you believe one thing, it must mean that you believe another thing. Like, I want to make it perfectly clear, we are also a band that is anti-violence. I don't in any way, shape, or form think that rioting is okay, like destroying a business. But I also know that the vast majority of Black Lives Matter supporters that are marching are not rioting. And you can't couple those two things together in the way that people, I think, do.
So Owen, I figured you and I could start with talking about classical music, and there are just a couple pieces that I
didn't know I was supposed to prepare for this podcast.
Well, I prepared for you.
Okay.
You don't need to. You're pretty knowledgeable.
So the pieces that are overtly political or related to political events that I think are worth mentioning are Shostakovich's symphonies 5, 7, and 10, because all of them are related to the oppression of Stalin, World War II. The 7th symphony is specifically about Leningrad, and then Shostakovich 10 includes a very unflattering depiction of Stalin.
Wasn't 8 also like very related to World War II? That has
I mean, he
really
was a Russian composer living in Russia during World War II, so
probably
he was. It was a pretty
27 million Russians died in that war, so it's hard not to have that sort of seep into your composition.
Right. Yeah.
But Owen's right. I mean, there was so much oppression that we have basically interpreted.
But I mean, you have to, because he just couldn't write about it, and he never fled. Some Soviet musicians fled to America. Actually, a lot of them. I mean, there was a whole generation of like amazing Russian, Jewish, usually soloists on piano, cello, violin, all sorts of stuff, who kind of got out. Shostakovich never got out. He was a little bit like Kogan or someone who just like was always within the Soviet system. So we never really knew what they thought. Were they pro or against, or was it a mix? I mean, it's complicated.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously those symphonies are I would encourage everyone to listen to them and read about them. They're very...
The Fifth Symphony especially is very interesting to delve deep on, the opening because it's an amazing piece. And also we don't really know. So a lot of it's speculation. So it's kind of fun to sort of like play with ideas.
The very end of that symphony is so effective. It's all in D major. And the orchestra just hammers on A's the entire time, and then the brass and the lower strings come in with these really ominous chords, but it's like still in D
Well, the
major, but there are
violins
these
are
really
just hammering the A's for like an entire page,
Yeah.
and they keep playing B flats over it, so minor seconds or major sevenths.
and you just
or
feel
minor
this
ninths.
tension,
Dissonance,
but
yeah.
also joy, but also fear. It's really, really effective writing. So
I don't.
check that
Laura,
out if you want to get
I
depressed.
don't know if you know anything about the SF Symphony, but could people watch the Keeping Score about that?
People could tune in to the Keeping Score on the
Yes.
Symphony's YouTube, SF Symphony's YouTube channel. You can watch it for
Michael
free.
Tilson
We'll put the
Thomas
link
did a whole
right
talk on it,
there.
which we happened to be at.
He
Laura
sure
and I
did.
were at that, whenever that was.
Right, that was so stressful. Anytime I've ever been at a recording, because classical concerts, they record the CDs while there's an audience, and there's like an announcement before that's like, please try to remain quiet. And so you just sit there like this for an hour while someone's like,
It's funny that you say that, because speaking of the fifth, the recording that I have is the Leningrad Symphony playing the fifth, and there's so much coughing in it, and the recording quality is not amazing. I mean, it was done a long time ago, but it's just I don't know. I personally like hearing the excess noise, because it's the same reason you like hearing excess noise at like a rock band's concert. It makes you feel like it's actually live, you know?
Well, I feel like the other couple pieces that we could mention are Messan's Quartet for the End of Time, which was written while he was in a concentration camp. It was performed by other people who were in the concentration camp with him. And
It's one of those like, ugh, keep politics out of music. Just because you're in a concentration camp doesn't mean you have to like be political about it.
I mean,
Some people are
you know,
trying to
it's
escape,
like
okay?
I mean,
No, but I mean that piece
and
too. If you listen to that
actually-
piece, it's like that piece like gets in your soul.
it really does. And also
Messes you up.
the music in Messan's case did save him.
Yeah, it did.
So, you know, I mean, he wrote that. It's now played all the time. It's a very famous piece. There's the Penderecki Threnody for the victims of Hiroshima.
Oh, I've heard that way too many times. Like, for whatever reason, that's the piece that most people see that once. I've seen that 5 times live.
I actually
Five
can't
times.
sit through it, to be honest.
It's
I
really
like it,
hard to
personally.
listen to, but I mean, I don't know.
We'll put all these pieces in our playlist.
Yeah.
So you can hear
Oh,
them.
and are there any others that you can think of?
God. Well, I mean, there's
have
stuff.
one other, but
There's
it's
stuff
modern.
all through history. I mean, if we had really like good documentation, I'm sure there's stuff like in Greek and Roman times. You know, we know there are
course.
plays and music were intertwined that are highly political. I mean, that's always just been a thing. Like Mozart.
Yeah, madrigals.
Mozart had to try for. I think it took him years to get the Marriage of Figaro published because it was considered a highly.
Controversial.
Well, yeah. So I guess the original play was much more on the nose about it. It was kind of an anti-aristocracy, anti-patriarchal play, and so they had to tone it down a lot. But still, at the end of the day, it's an opera about people challenging the patriarch of like a feudal court and making him look like an idiot. So it's considered very subversive.
Yes, music is entertainment. Music is an escape, but music is also the voice of who is writing it and what they're going through. Like you're saying, like there's no way, I was saying, I think on Tommy's podcast, one of the things that I'm struggling with right now is that I'm writing Act 3. And while it is a concept and it has a story, the lyrics are going to reflect, if they haven't been written, what's happening in my brain now. And there are a few songs that I'm like, I want to release this now because it is so important to now. It is what I'm feeling now, and I have to wait. And you can't remove the world that you live in and the perspective that you have as an artist. You just can't do that. That's the whole point of what we do. part of the reason John and I started the family Crest. You know, we were in a group that at the time, and this was just our take, but at the time we felt was in it trying to make it. And the music that I was writing for that group, I didn't feel had the soul that I wanted to push to the world. That's nothing more than it wasn't saying what I wanted to say. It was literally doing the entertainment route of music. If you want to listen to bands that are literally just making, or artists that are just making music for capital gain, there's plenty of them out there, but maybe we're not the band to listen to in that regard.
We've done a bad job if
it is really
what we were trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, like that's literally like we're in this because we love it. Again, like there's not a lot of money. We've talked about it so much in our industry right now. Most of the artists I know are not making any money really from the majority of the people that listen to their music on a daily basis. I mean, Laura and I were going through our Spotify, and we're always blown away that we have listeners in all sorts of different places. And in no way am I upset about the fact that people are listening to our music in, for example, Siberia or Singapore or Japan or wherever for free. I love the fact that they get to hear it, but it is still free. You know, like we're not getting paid a whole lot of money for you to listen to our music. And when we have these shows, you know, we're showcasing not only the music that we play, but who we are. And, you know, I also don't think that, I think we're in this weird place in our, I don't know if it's global, but specifically in American history, where if you disagree with somebody, suddenly you are their enemy. I mean, there's plenty of people, like I said, that I have relationships with, or that I have friendships with from years ago that have very different views than I do. And some of which I think their views are abhorrent. But I'm not going to just shrug them off and say I'm not going to like partake in any kind of relationship with that person, because all that does is draw a line in the sand, and you don't actually listen to what anyone's saying. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like also as the years go by, a lot of the original intent of songs changes, and because people forget when they were written, why they were written. So like I was like preparing a little bit for this podcast, and you know, my dad loves like the Eagles and Springsteen, and Don Henley and Springsteen have written some of the most like anti-war, like radical fight the man,
dude,
like
I think
songs in our country's history.
I think I heard "Born in the USA" at the RNC being played. Didn't
they do that again?
I know, so
I was like, didn't they learn that when Reagan tried it? I guess not.
When Reagan tried to do it, and Springsteen's like,
He's
no.
like, yo, this isn't what you think it is. They're like,
this is not what you think it's about.
But I was thinking, Laura, it's funny what you said about, you were talking about a piece that's written right now about current political situations. I think it's important for people to hear that too, because it definitely, you experience it different if you're living through that specific thing. Because sort of there's things from the 60s, which is still America, but like we didn't live through civil rights. And I was thinking back about other stuff like 60s, so George Crumb, Black Angels, that's about the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
That's a hard piece to listen to.
I can't listen to it. It gives me
it will give you
straight up,
nightmares.
and
we've talked about it before.
Yeah, that piece straight up is, if I could imagine what it sounds like descending into hell, like in my mind, if you die and if there is a hell and you're falling into hell, it's kind of like, to bring it back around, it's kind of like in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey when they're falling into hell and they're literally just falling through blackness, waiting to land on whatever hell is. But in Crumb's piece, it literally sounds like there are these like demon bats zipping around you every once in a while, and it's so
my friend
creepy.
Caitlin, not my girlfriend, said it sounds like rats trying to claw their way out of your heart, like out of your chest.
Ugh. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
But it's just funny. I was thinking back, and I was like, yeah, I do think it's really important to listen to stuff that's from your time, because you're always going to have more of an intrinsic, emotional, and mental connection with the music, right? Because it's about something that you're part of. Like, for instance, when in Shostakovich 5, the slow move, Shostakovich 5 was written right at the end of the Great Purge, which, if anyone doesn't know what that is, there's a time when Stalin did a great purge of, it ended up being a purge of everything. And people didn't like, people who didn't agree with that, gay people, anything. People just were disappearing for 2 years straight. They think it's around 1 million. It's 1 to 5 million. Like, literally nobody knows how many people died. But it was a horrible, terrifying time to be alive. And his slow movement in that is very intense. And so it's one of those, like, does he have to say? It doesn't need lyrics for people to know what that's about.
Right. I mean, and having done even the movie theme shows that I've been doing. Last week I did The Sound of Silence. Mm-hmm. Which I'm going to say one of the biggest bummers about The Sound of Silence is that if you type in The Sound of Silence and hit enter on Google, you get Disturbed.
I thought that's not from them.
It is. No. But what's interesting is I've heard that song for years. And obviously Simon and Garfunkel came from the 60s. They had a lot of political songs. But I've actually never, and I think most people, when they listen to music, or a lot of people, I'm not going to say most, don't actually sit down and listen to the lyrical content in a way that they actually take it in. And whenever I do one of these covers, I have to do that because I'm trying to figure out how to best represent what that part of the song is. That song it really hit me because, unfortunately, I feel like we have repeated a lot in the last few years of things that we had solved in the past, that things that we hadn't solved, that we compartmentalized and we pretended that these problems didn't exist in the day-to-day, I think, for the average American citizen. And if you, specifically, I'm talking about racism if you didn't get the subtext, but if you listen to that song, the last verse of that song hit me real hard. Because again, a lot's based on interpretation when you listen to lyrics, which I think is great. Win Butler from Arcade Fire almost never reveals what a song is about because he believes a song is about what you think it's about. I don't fully believe that. I think there's obviously a point to blend, what you're trying to say. It's a blend. But what I took from that is it sounds like it's talking about a neon prophet, this false prophet that is giving all these ideas without any actual basis of reality, and watching the people just kind of follow it without actually thinking about the context of how it applies to their lives from a moral standpoint or as from a humanistic standpoint. I think when we go down that rabbit hole that we can say, well, my pride outweighs the obvious need for reform to Black lives around the country in America. I know so many people in my personal life that I know understand the plight, that understand that it's a problem, but are unwilling to admit it because of their pride. And, when you look to songs of the 60s, it's interesting to see that we're repeating so many things. So many of those things can be applied. There was an interview with, which this is going to sound weird, but before I knew who Alex Jones was, there was an interview with Billy Corgan that Alex Jones did. And Alex Jones asked
that's a lot of intense energy in one place.
Yeah. That's a lot of weirdness.
He agreed to do that? Billy Corgan agreed to do that?
Well, Corgan's an interesting, weird guy. But one thing that I thought was interesting about the interview is Jones asked him, there's all these, you look at music and the songs of the 60s were so much about like politics and so many people disagree with so many different things nowadays. Why are we not seeing political songs? And Corgan said, well, I don't think that it's desired from the artist anymore. Back in the day, we looked to artists to guide us, to give us these viewpoints, to kind of push the emotional consciousness of the people that listen to the music. I mean, you didn't have the Suits listening to Simon and Garfunkel in the 50s and 60s. You know what I mean? You had people that were like Simon and Garfunkel listening to their music. Now, because we've removed the face of the artist and all artists are essentially their music and nothing else, we're not allowed to say anything political. No, we are allowed, but
when was this interview recorded? Because
5 years ago.
Oh, 5 years ago?
Really?
5 years ago?
My theory, though,
What is he talking about?
this is like 5, well, maybe
Google it,
longer.
see if I can find
But what I'm going to say is, what I think is interesting though is, and what he didn't mention is, I think that artists now are leaning into sometimes obvious and shouldn't be considered subtext, but subtext, where they're saying things and they're disguising it because they don't feel that they can actually be who they are through their lyricism without potentially being, and I'm going to use a right-wing term here, canceled. You know, like they're worried about the fact that if they offend 50% or 30% of their audience with one word, with one or with one actual interpretation of the true events that they're going through, they're going to be canceled. And I think that's it's weird because we're in this because of that subtext and because it's not. I mean, you listen to Simon and Garfunkel, and what they're saying is like you can't misinterpret that. With nowadays, you have pop artists, and I can't quote any, but I've heard plenty, so I'll try to look into it, and you can drop them below if I find them. But there's plenty of pop artists even that I've heard that are throwing out subtext in their lyrics without actually making a verbatim like Black Lives Matter statement. They're doing it through their award ceremonies.
True.
I mean, like props to The Weeknd at VMAs. He didn't thank anybody. He just said this time that we're in is really hard to go through. I'm really sad. So, you know,
justice for Jacob
justice for Breonna Taylor and
Jacob
Blake. And, you know, so there obviously that's a blanket statement. I mean, I was surprised actually when we watched the VMAs that MTV paid for an ad that was 100% backing this problem. And when MTV is doing it and they are concerned about the same thing that we are, it's an obvious problem. You know, I mean,
we're kind of getting a little
Well, I
off
think that's an
topic.
interesting point, though. Like, there's been a real shift in sort of the way brands talk about it. And I'll say, like, woke brands is, like, my least favorite thing in the entire world. I just find it, I mean, I guess I'm glad that it's socially acceptable to support some of these things for brands, but I just find the whole thing so disingenuous. But you have, you can use it as a barometer in a way, though, because, like, there's been such a shift around talking. I mean, the NFL commissioner came out and said we were wrong about Colin Kaepernick. After they
give him a job and then
him,
talk
which is
to me.
insane. Like, it's progress.
Well, and I think that's, you know, you can argue, because I see a lot of people argue this, it's a trend. I don't think it's a trend. I think it's people that knew better in the first place that were in the same place that artists are in, where they're like, if we say, and they're running multi-million, sometimes billion-dollar industries, where they're like, if we say this, we could lose 50% of our capital. If they're saying it, then clearly they're willing to take the capital risk to do it because it's the right thing to do.
I think they're just reading the room and seeing that, like, a lot of people care very strongly about this. Like when Nike made Colin Kaepernick their spokesperson or whatever for that campaign. Their stock gained $1 billion in market capitalization in one day. That's not them taking a risk. It's a calculated risk, sure, but like they're just being business people, whatever. It's still good to see in a sense because it means like, okay, most of the world is on the side that we agree with here.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's been interesting for me in preparing for this has been like revisiting the ways in which people make political statements and who is making the statements. So, you know, obviously like Bob Dylan is like hailed as being sort of a bad boy, a booster boob, if you will. And he, you know, he wrote like, he's prolific. He's written so many protest songs about every possible situation. But also, you know, the other like Woodstock people, like Joan Baez has written so many protest songs. Joni Mitchell, Patti Smith.
Like there's plenty of artists that have written political songs, and there's plenty of artists that have gone out and made political statements. I mean, like some of them do it in a more grotesque way. I mean, Sinead O'Connor went on SNL and ripped up a photo of the Pope. I understand if you're Catholic at that time specifically that you're going to be offended by that. And that's pretty grotesque, but like, you know, and there may have been a better way to do it. I personally think it was dope.
Well, it's interesting too. She's from a different culture
but
than
again,
we are, where like it has so many different historical
Right.
contexts to it.
But I think at the end of the day, like there's always been a struggle, or at least in popular culture, there's been a struggle to say what you want to say or say what you believe. And over time, we've learned as artists to do that through this kind of subtext. And it's getting to the point now that, I mean,
Well,
when it's so heavy, you can't really do it through subtext anymore, because I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like I was telling Laura, we went to see my parents and we were driving back, and what shocked me was this isn't even about COVID, but like from the perspective of a person of color, and Asian Americans experience racism, but they don't experience it nearly as high as African Americans by any means. But from the perspective of somebody that has experienced racism, that has experienced the fear that comes with it, you know, for the first time in my life, I feel an actual sense of fear that if we keep going down the road that we're headed down through the rhetoric where we are, through the rhetoric, I'm just going to say it, through the rhetoric of our president, just supporting violent acts and hate and things like that, I actually have a fear that if this man is elected again, that potentially somebody could come for me. That what's the next step? Where is interracial marriage going to become an issue? Like, we're seeing people going into the streets with machine guns and having the people that are supposed to protect us, regardless of the fact that they're pissed off that they don't feel respected, literally giving them water and saying, thank you for being here. And then we're seeing a large population in America saying, giving money to the person for their law fees and saying, well, this was done in self-defense. I mean, at the end of the day, when does it go even farther? When am I going to have to worry? So at the end of the day, like the fear that I feel is very real. It's going to come out in my music, and what I'm feeling pales in comparison to the people that are the African-American community in the United States. That's going to seep into my music. That's going to seep into my consciousness. I don't, because of the quarantine specifically, just like all of you, don't have anywhere to go. So it's going to come out in what I talk about. And I try very, very hard not to, because I agree to an extent that music and seeing a live concert is something that is an escape, and it shouldn't be something that is a soapbox for politics. But if somebody talks about something that they believe in and that they're afraid of for 30 seconds, what right do you have to say that that is not cool in any regard? That just doesn't make sense to me. It's just kind of callous and
I agree,
selfish,
and I don't
in
think
my
music
opinion.
is an escape necessarily. I think it's a different experience. But like that can involve politics and emotion and pain and whatever. I mean
Well, it's a very personal thing. Some people will listen to Simon and Garfunkel and automatically hear the protest songs of the 60s. Some people will put it on when they cook and not listen to the lyrics at all. You know, it is personal, but why is it okay to thrust your personal belief of what that music represents onto an artist when they're performing a show?
Yeah, I agree. I think most people will agree. By the way, just to clarify that half-white joke, just to make that make sense in context.
Yeah.
That's the thing I used to say at the
Yes.
merch table when people would ask what race Liam was. They'd be like, is he Filipino? What is he?
Which
I think he's half white. And then I'd not.
And also, fun fact, for the majority of the first 3 years of the family Crest, most people thought that Liam McCormick was Owen Sutter.
It showed up there, so
It's
you're
full
Liam
circle.
McCormick. Nope.
One thing I wanted to mention is that, history is cyclical. It repeats itself. And a lot of the music of the 60s is completely applicable to our time, the time we're living in right now. I mean, Sam Cooke saying a change is going to come, and that song still rings very true, to me at least, in the context that we're living in right now. And, John Prine passed away earlier this year, and I've been kind of revisiting some of his music. And, he's an amazing songwriter, an amazing lyricist and storyteller. And I think one of his most powerful songs is Sam Stone. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with Sam Stone, but it tells the story of a man who comes back from the Vietnam War, and becomes addicted to heroin. And it kind of talks about how it very potently describes like the emotional pain leading to addiction. And, we had so many soldiers come back from the Iraq War, Afghanistan War, and we have a huge opioid epidemic in America that's getting less press coverage right now because of all the other crises that we're dealing with simultaneously.
What crises?
But I just, it's so, I think like it's kind of comforting in a way that people have lived through this type of thing before, and there are musical records of it, and we can turn to those musical records. I think also in terms of other, like less or more overt, I feel like actually the 2010s, like it was much more overt criticism and commentary, or like the 2000s to the 2010s, like American Idiot is like pretty much just putting it all right out there. Or like Lady Gaga, like a lot of her songs are like very like much about like empowering people and like particularly like expressing love for the queer community. And that kind of like ruffled feathers when she first came out too.
Yeah, I mean, what I think at the end of the day, because again, I have friends on both sides of the ticket. What I feel is we have a responsibility from a social perspective to be kind and be aware of what other people are feeling. And, in America, we're seeing a lot of people going against wearing masks because they're, upset that they have to wear masks and they think it's a left-wing thing. The way I look at it on all these fronts is, how does it affect your life to actually make someone feel safe in this country? And, it's not hard to put something over your mouth and walk around. It really isn't. Even if you don't like doing it, it's not hard to do it. And you might not like doing it, but I don't like doing it. I mean, we go on walks every once in a while, and I fucking hate wearing a mask because I can't breathe. Or I can't breathe well. But at the end of the day, I'm going to do it because I don't want my friend's mom who is sick getting sicker or dying because of that. I think at the end of the day, we have to look at this as a whole, as a humanistic standpoint. We have to just be aware of each other's beliefs. We have to take them into consideration. We have to learn and listen to what each other are saying. And we can't draw these lines in the sand in America. We just can't do it anymore.
Before we adjourn, I just had a couple more protest songs that I feel like I have to mention. So MIA, Paper Planes. Very political protest
Going
song.
to a Town, Rufus Wainwright.
This Is America, Donald Glover.
How do we forget that?
Camino. Obviously Marvin Gaye, What's Going On. Public Enemy, Fight the Power. Beyonce, Formation. Kendrick Lamar, All Right, slash his entire discography.
Or even that Anderson .Paak song I did as my music pick, 2 weeks ago, Tense. It's all about how they, like, I don't feel safe being myself outside.
A lot of different cultures and races are writing protest songs. You don't just have to be a Black American to be feeling this right now, because it's hard to watch anyone, whatever race they are, die for any reason, period. It's just hard to watch, and we're seeing a lot of it. Anyway, yeah.
Can I offer a final thought before we
do.
stop? So, just to kind of bring it full circle and to the beginning of this episode.
Are you somehow tagging in Bill and Ted to this?
No,
No.
I'm not gonna do it. I'm gonna read something my girlfriend actually told me. I was telling her like this is what we're doing for the podcast or talking about for the podcast, and she said something, like, yeah, that's right, I'm gonna say that, and then I totally forgot, and so I just asked her to text it to me right now. And basically, and what
Good
she
boyfriend.
said, she's a licensed art therapist, just so you know. So, and she said on the topic of music and politics and stuff like that, she says, everything something creates can't be free of politics. Everything we create is a phenomenological representation of a uniquely experienced moment. And everything that's created is going to be a reflection of what's going on in the culture of the time, whether or not the artist intends it to be.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Intrinsically linked.
Yeah.
So I guess ending this to bring it into some kind of unity. Don't fight each other. Listen to each other. Don't approach each other with fists. Don't try to get into flame wars on Facebook. It doesn't do anything good. If you want to talk to somebody, call them, message them. Do it without an audience, because at the end of the day, the audience is going to cause you to literally go into a mode where you're writing words that you don't use in your general vernacular. You're just writing big words to try to out-talk the other person. Like there's plenty of people in this country that have varying opinions. And honestly, some of the people you disagree with might have opinions that are valid and it's worth listening to, even if you don't think you'll agree with them. I know I've learned a lot from actually having both sides on my feed. And, arguing amidst the public isn't going to do anything at all. So try to just be as bipartisan as you can, not as partisan as you can, as bipartisan as you can, and be good people. I mean, at the end of the day, we all have to freaking live here. We're all going through this quarantine. We're all going through this process. We can either decide that we're going to go into our own heads and hate each other, or realize that we're all going through the same fucking thing that everyone else in the entire world, for the first time probably ever, is going through. We are literally stuck in our houses with our phones and our Netflix.
Now that I will tie into Bill and Ted and say, be excellent to each other.
Hey.
and party on,
register
dudes.
To vote.
And register to vote.
Dudes.
During the Spanish flu, they
register to
didn't
vote.
have Netflix, so it could be worse,
Yeah.
And I'll also say, anyone's having a hard time, which, like, who's not having a hard time? Again, the Discord, great place to come.
Join the Discord.
Everyone, it's for everything these days. I mean, people rant in there. It's for support. Yep. It's for politics. It's just for screaming into the void, as Merle just came in and did, which is fine. And we're all just kind of propping each other up in there. So it's very good vibes. Come on in.
thefamilycrest.com/fam.
And you know what? If you very much disagree with anything that I said, John, you can throw my Instagram handle down here. Just message me. Don't do it over public shit, because we're not going to get anything done. Like, I'm willing to listen to whatever anyone has to say, because I find people interesting, and I might learn something. So join the Discord. We're all loving. We love you guys. No matter what you believe in terms of politics, we love you. And, we hope that at the end of the day, you understand that regardless of if you have different beliefs than what we carry, we do want the best for every person that has to exist in this insane world that we're living in. And we hope that the music that we write and that we make brings you some kind of joy or some kind of escape, because there is a purpose and there is a truth to that statement, that it is an escape to some degree. And so if it does, we're happy about that, and we love you.
And finally, if you disagree with anything Liam said, but you don't want to interact with him, if you message me, I'll give you his home address for $20. You can send him a dog poop in a box. And you know what?
Dog poop on fire, and
it's poop again.
All right. Well, good night, everyone.
All right.
We'll see what happens.
Good night. Subscribe and rate.
Stay safe.